All right, so think about those times when you're playing a game and you make a choice. Not just like picking a dialogue option, but like a choice that really ripples outward. You ever feel like a decision you made really shifted the world around you?
It really is incredible how a single choice can kind of snowball, isn't it? I remember running a game once where the party came across this hidden temple. They found an artifact inside, glowing with power, and now they could have taken it, right? But they chose to leave it undisturbed.
Wow.
So fast forward like a few months in game time, their decision led to the temple becoming a pilgrimage site. It became this beacon of peace in this war-torn land. The players' restraint literally reshaped the region's entire political landscape.
That's wild. That's the kind of magic we're diving into today, though player-driven world building in D&D. We've got a fantastic article from LitRPG Reads that breaks down how to make your D&D world feel truly reactive to player choices.
Yeah. So traditional D&D, it often starts with a static world. The DM presents a setting. Players adventure through it. Player-driven world building flips that on its head. Imagine a campaign where the world is a canvas, and the players, through their actions, they're the painters. Every decision is a brushstroke, shaping the world's destiny.
So instead of just traveling through a predetermined story, players become active participants in world building.
Exactly.
That's got to be way more immersive.
Absolutely, yeah. When the world reacts to your choices, your successes, your failures, they have weight. Every session becomes a chance to leave your mark on the world, knowing your actions have consequences.
That makes a lot of sense. The article highlights a bunch of reasons why this type of play just enhances a campaign. It creates personal stakes for each character. For one, it's not about saving the world, it's about how it impacts places and people your character cares about.
Like imagine your character's childhood village is threatened by bandits, right?
Okay, yeah.
In a traditional game, you might clear out the bandits, problem solved. But in a reactive world, your choices could determine if the village prospers after. Attracting trade, fortifying its defenses, all because of what you did.
Okay, so every session has the potential to be impactful.
Yeah.
The article also talks about creating unique narratives that are tailored to the party. How does that work in practice?
Instead of relying just on pre-written modules, the DM can weave the players' backstories into the campaign setting. Imagine a player's got a backstory about being framed for a crime they didn't commit.
Okay.
That event could be tied to a larger conspiracy that becomes the central plot of the campaign, personalized for that player.
Oh, so not only are your choices changing the world, but the world is reflecting your character's personal journey. That's really cool.
And that leads into dynamic world evolution. Instead of following a predictable plot line, the story unfolds organically based on the player's actions. This means you can have unexpected twists and turns without sacrificing narrative coherence.
So even if the DM have a plan in mind,
Right.
players can nudge the story in different directions.
Exactly, yeah.
I bet that keeps things exciting for both the players and the DM.
The article gives a really interesting example. Imagine there's a campaign with a powerful necromancer as the main villain. In a traditional game, you defeat the necromancer. End of story. But what if, through their choices, the players accidentally create the conditions that allow another even more powerful necromancer to come about? Suddenly the stakes are raised and the story takes this unexpected turn.
It's like one of those moments in a TV show where you think you know what's going to happen, but the writers throw a curveball and it changes the entire game.
And that unpredictability is what makes player-driven world building so compelling. It creates this living, breathing world that responds to choices, enhances immersion, creates a truly collaborative storytelling experience.
The article also mentions how collaborative storytelling is a key benefit. It's not just the DM telling the story, it's everyone at the table building a narrative together.
Yeah, think of it as a shared creative space where the players are active participants in crafting the history of the world. This can lead to unexpected alliances, surprising betrayals, moments of emergent storytelling that you just wouldn't find in a traditional game.
It almost sounds like improv theater, where everyone is just building off each other's ideas. And speaking of ideas, the article talks about designing open-ended conflicts and factions to allow for maximum player influence. How would a DM approach that?
So instead of presenting conflicts with clear-cut good and bad sides, the DM creates factions with complex motivations and goals. Imagine two kingdoms locked in a trade war. Instead of siding with one or the other, the players might try to negotiate a peace treaty. They might even play the two kingdoms against each other for their own benefit.
So the players have the agency to influence the outcome of those conflicts, or maybe even reshape power structures.
Exactly. Imagine a world where the player's actions could elevate the small, fledgling guild into a major political force, or even topple an empire from within. It's about giving players the tools to make meaningful changes to the world.
This is really starting to click. But honestly, as someone who enjoys crafting intricate plots and backstories, I'm wondering how this much freedom for players impacts the DM's ability to tell a cohesive story. Doesn't it risk things spiraling out of control?
That's a valid concern. It brings us to a crucial aspect of player-driven world building. Finding the balance between player freedom and narrative structure. While players have the power to shape the world, the DM still sets the stage and ensures the story remains coherent and engaging.
So it's more about being a conductor than a dictator, guiding the orchestra of player actions toward a harmonious, albeit unpredictable symphony.
Exactly.
I like that analogy.
And that's what makes this style of play so rewarding for both players and DMs. It's a delicate dance, but when it works, it creates a truly unforgettable gaming experience.
This has been incredibly enlightening. But I can imagine some DMs feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this. Giving players this much agency sounds amazing, but how do you manage all the moving parts? How do you keep track of all the changes and consequences?
That's where good organizational skills come into play and a willingness to adapt. But the article does have some practical techniques for managing a reactive world, which we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. You know, you're right about that organization and adaptation. Those are key. But the article offers some helpful tips for DMs. One of the things it suggests is to focus on those key changes instead of trying to track every single detail.
So it's about identifying those pivotal moments, those decisions that have the potential to actually reshape the world in a meaningful way and building upon those.
Precisely. Instead of getting bogged down in documenting every tiny change, focus on the big picture. How do the players' actions affect the major factions, the political landscape, the overall trajectory of the world?
Okay, so even focusing on the big picture, there's still a lot to manage. The article also mentions using things like campaign logs or NPC status sheets. Can you elaborate a little on how those tools can be helpful?
Absolutely. A campaign log can serve as a chronicle of major events, like recording those key decisions, their immediate consequences, and any potential long-term repercussions. It's like having a history book for your campaign world, written collaboratively by the DM and the players.
I like that, like a living document that evolves alongside the game world. What about NPC status sheets? How can those be used to track the impact of player choices?
NPC status sheets are great for tracking how individual characters react to events. Let's say the players help a struggling merchant secure a trade deal. You can note that on their status sheet, along with how their business prospers. Maybe they become a patron of the arts or a political influencer thanks to the players' help.
So it's not just about noting what happened, but also projecting how those events might influence an NPC's future actions and relationships.
Exactly. It adds this layer of depth to the world, showing that actions have ripple effects, and even those seemingly minor characters can be shaped by player choices.
This is really starting to paint a clear picture of how a DM can build this reactive world. But the world itself needs to reflect these changes, right? It can't just be numbers on a sheet. Players need to see the impact of their actions.
Absolutely. The article highlights the importance of making those changes visible and tangible for the players. One technique is to have NPCs react to past choices, even years later.
So it's not just immediate consequences, it's about weaving those choices into the fabric of the world so they resonate over time.
Precisely. Imagine the players return to a city they helped save from an invasion years ago. The city has flourished, its walls are rebuilt, and a statue of the party stands proudly in the town square. It's a powerful reminder of their lasting impact on the world.
I can see how those visual cues would really make players feel like their choices matter. It reinforces that sense of agency we talked about earlier.
And those changes don't have to be grand gestures either. It could be something as simple as an NPC greeting the players warmly, remembering their past kindness, or expressing distrust based on a previous betrayal. It's the little details that bring the world to life.
It's all about weaving those consequences into the tapestry of the world, both big and small. But what about those times when players come up with those out there ideas, those schemes that seem completely off the wall or potentially disruptive to the narrative?
Oh, those are golden opportunities. The article encourages DMs to embrace those unexpected moments. Instead of viewing them as derailments, see them as chances to flex your creative muscles and collaborate with your players.
So instead of saying no, we should say yes and improvise and see where those crazy ideas take us.
Precisely. Imagine the players hatch this plan to infiltrate an enemy fortress by disguising themselves as traveling acrobats. It might seem ridiculous, but it could lead to a hilarious and memorable session filled with unexpected challenges and role-playing opportunities.
And who knows, it might even uncover new plot threads or reveal unexpected vulnerabilities in the enemy's defenses.
Exactly. By embracing those dumb ideas, you're not just creating a fun and unpredictable gaming experience, you're also empowering your players to be creative and think outside the box.
That's a great point. It's about fostering this sense of collaboration and trust at the table, where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas, no matter how outlandish they might seem.
And sometimes, those seemingly crazy ideas lead to the most brilliant solutions and memorable moments. It's all about embracing the unexpected and trusting the collaborative storytelling process.
Speaking of storytelling, I think that's such a crucial aspect of player-driven world building. It's not just about reacting mechanically to player choices, but about weaving those choices into a compelling narrative.
You're absolutely right. It's about taking those player actions and translating them into a story that feels engaging, meaningful, and ultimately satisfying for everyone involved.
So it's not just about saying, okay, you helped that merchant, so now they're rich. It's about showing how their newfound wealth impacts their personality, their relationships, and maybe even their role in the larger world.
Precisely. It's about using those choices as springboards for deeper exploration of character motivations, relationships, and the themes you want to explore in your campaign.
And that's where the DM's storytelling skills really shine. It's about using vivid descriptions, compelling dialogue, and those show-don't-tell moments to bring the world to life and make the players feel truly invested in the story.
Imagine the players are investigating a series of mysterious disappearances in a bustling port city. Instead of just listing clues, the DM can paint this vivid picture of the city's seedy underbelly, the desperation of those affected by the disappearances, and the growing sense of paranoia that grips the city.
Wow, that creates an atmosphere of tension and intrigue. I can already imagine the players getting hooked on the mystery.
Exactly. It's about creating a world that feels real and immersive, where every choice matters and the players are constantly engaged in the unfolding narrative.
And it's not just about the present either. The article talks about using foreshadowing and callbacks to remind players of past choices and how they continue to shape the world. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Absolutely. Let's say the players made a powerful enemy early in the campaign. Instead of that enemy just disappearing, the DM can drop subtle hints of their growing influence, their schemes brewing in the shadows, until they resurface at a pivotal moment, their vendetta fueled by the player's past actions.
Oh, that's fantastic. It creates the sense of continuity and consequence, reminding the players that their choices have lasting repercussions.
And those callbacks don't have to be ominous. They can be positive, too. Maybe a character the players helped in the past shows up unexpectedly, offering aid at a crucial moment, their gratitude a testament to the player's lasting impact on their lives.
It's all about weaving those threads together, creating a tapestry of choices and consequences that feels organic and compelling. I think that's a great place to pause for a moment and reflect on everything we've discussed so far. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been unpacking this idea of player-driven world building in D&D. And honestly, it's making me rethink how I approach games entirely.
It really opens up like this whole new dimension of storytelling, doesn't it? Transforms D&D from a game with like a set path to this collaborative experience where the journey is just as important as the destination.
Absolutely. We've talked about how it deepens immersion, creates personal stakes, leads to dynamic storytelling.
Yeah.
One thing that keeps coming back to me is that sense of agency for the players.
It's empowering, right?
Yeah.
In a traditional game, you might feel like you're playing through someone else's story.
Yeah.
But with player-driven world building, you're crafting that narrative alongside the DM. Choices have real weight, shaping the world, influencing its destiny.
It's not about power fantasy either.
Yeah.
It's about meaningful choices, both big and small. The article mentions even seemingly insignificant decisions can have ripple effects. Can you give me an example of how that might play out?
Sure. Imagine the players encounter a group of refugees fleeing a war-torn region.
Okay.
They could offer them shelter, supplies, maybe even help them reach a safe haven. Now that might seem like a side quest, but those actions could have long-term consequences. Maybe those refugees establish a thriving community, their culture influencing the region, thanks to the players' compassion.
Wow. That brings up a point we haven't touched on too much. The potential for players to have a positive impact on the world.
Yeah.
It's not just about battles and dungeons. It's about shaping society, influencing culture, leaving a legacy.
Exactly. Player-driven world building encourages players to think about the consequences of their actions, not just in terms of immediate rewards, but in terms of that long-term impact. It adds a layer of moral complexity to the game that I find really compelling.
I bet. And it creates opportunities for really rich character development, too. Players might start out with simple motivations, but as they see the impact of their choices, their values and priorities might shift. They could become leaders, reformers, even revolutionaries.
Like, imagine a player who starts the campaign as a cynical rogue, only interested in personal gain. But through their interactions with the world and the consequences of their actions, they develop a sense of responsibility, maybe even altruism. They become a champion of the people, their past cynicism replaced by a desire to make the world a better place.
That's a powerful example of how player-driven world building can go beyond the mechanics and really delve into what makes a character tick. It's about growth, transformation, and realizing that even in a fantasy world, actions have consequences.
Yeah, and it's not just the players who benefit from this approach. I think it can be incredibly liberating for DMs as well.
You know, that's something I was curious about. How does player-driven world building change the role of the DM? Does it make things easier or harder or just different?
It definitely shifts the dynamic. Instead of being the sole author of the story, the DM becomes more of a facilitator, a collaborator in the storytelling process.
Okay.
It requires a different mindset, one that embraces flexibility and improvisation.
So instead of having a rigid plan, it's more about setting the stage and then responding to what the players bring to the table.
Exactly. It's like being a jazz musician. You have a melody in mind, but you're open to improv, letting the music flow organically based on the contributions of each player.
I love that. And it makes sense, given how much we've talked about embracing those, dumb ideas. Those moments when players go off script and surprise you with their creativity.
Those are often the most memorable and rewarding moments, both for the players and the DM. That's where the magic of collaborative storytelling really comes alive.
It really does reinforce that this style of play isn't just about mechanics. It's about creating a shared experience, a world that everyone feels invested in and excited to explore.
And I think that's the key takeaway from the article and our discussion today. Player-driven world building transforms D&D from a game you play to a world you inhabit and help create. It's a truly collaborative, immersive experience that can lead to unforgettable stories and lasting memories.
Well said. It's definitely sparked a lot of ideas for me. I bet our listeners are feeling the same way. Before we wrap up, I want to give a huge shout out to LitRPG Reads and Paul Bello for their insightful article that really inspired this whole conversation. Sure to check out their work for more great content on the world of D&D and tabletop gaming.
Absolutely. And to all our listeners out there, we'd love to hear your thoughts on player-driven world building. Have you tried it in your own games? What are some of your favorite examples of how player choices have shaped your campaigns? Share your stories and insights in the comments below.
Until next time, happy gaming, and may your choices shape worlds in ways you never imagined.